But we're going to rank today all the Star Wars movies and tier lists. Sorry, Star Wars movies and TV shows on a tier list. I'm just going to pick one randomly and just drag it up and then give my opinions for it. I'm shooting from the hip. I don't have any notes or anything like that. This is just pure, unadulterated um, gut feeling on these things. So just as an introduction, we're going to have, and we're doing this live for those who are watching it back on YouTube. So if you ever do um, want to come give your input, you can come to the channel, or if you hear me just acknowledging someone else's presence, that is the reason why. Um, so I'll start by describing the categories here. It's fairly simple. It's tier listing, right? But the way I've seen people do it and the way I kind of like it makes sense to me to lay out is if something is um, we'll start with the middle, right? It's just okay. Something's just average and it doesn't hurt or harm the franchise. Um, I think it's a C, right? Doesn't really add anything, doesn't hurt, right? So C category for us will be average, doesn't really add anything, maybe adds very little, but it doesn't also, and maybe it detracts a little bit, but not very much. It kind of counterbalances to a C. It's just average. Uh, if we're going downwards first, so now we're in D tier. Let me erase E altogether. We'll just go F and F plus. There's no E. F plus is like ridiculously bad. D tier is it's bad. Um, it's actively harming the franchise by existing, so harming Star Wars by being around. Um, but it has a little bit of redeeming quality here and there, so that it can kind of be bumped up from complete and total failure of a mess. Um, I don't think I'm going to use F plus, but F is going to be actively hurts the franchise by existing. Um, very little to no redeeming quality, and I guess F plus will be like no redeeming quality whatsoever. It's just straight painful that it exists. It just hurts things. There's nothing in it that can even be remotely considered decent. Um, Going upwards from C, so now we're at average again. If you go up to B, it's decent. You know, it's going towards being a productive TV show or film. It's adding good characters to the universe. People that watch it come away with good experiences and redeeming qualities overall. A is getting into that. It's rock solid. It's actively adding to the franchise and making it better. It's not perfect, but it's darn good. And then S tier, we're talking like chef's kiss, perfection, um, foundation of the franchise gets moved because of it, or it established the franchise foundation. Um, Nothing but love for that one. So that's our groundwork we're gonna go with. I'm just gonna pick a random one here in the middle. We'll start with Visions. So this one, uh, I'm gonna start them. You know, it's obviously on the top end here, but I can move them down. Visions is a good one to start with. It's animated short films. Um, there is an anime one that's very samurai for the Jedi. It's a very nice little change of pace for Star Wars. It didn't really add anything amazing, didn't really hurt in any way. It was just a different way of telling some small, short Star Wars tales. It's fine. Um, it gives different takes and version, a little spotlight of Star Wars. No problems with it whatsoever. It's a Disney Plus original. It didn't really do anything, didn't hurt anything. It wasn't great. It was very short. Let's see. Now, I can't tell. Is this? I got Clone Wars here, but I can't tell if that's the Clone Wars movie. Because if it's the Clone War, I'm gonna assume this is just for our purposes, that this is the Clone Wars movie, and that this one, I don't think there's another one. I can fix it if it comes up, but there's another one here that's the Clone Wars, and I think that's the TV show. It could also be just the seventh season, which is weird to separate it. But we're gonna go with the Clone Wars movie. Now, Clone Wars ended up being a smashing success overall, but the movie, I'm gonna go with D tier. I, as a Star Wars fan, remember renting this when it came out from Blockbuster. It'll date me a little bit. In college, and my God, the the movie was almost unwatchable. It was cringy every time that little Jabba the Hutt, uh, baby Hutt came on. I was like, what are we watching? Every time the droids make like a kitty joke, I'm like, what the hell is happening here? Now it ended up being part of like a bigger universe that was pretty darn good overall, but it had a lot of kitty moments. George was really at the time trying to get the franchise going for the direction of kids and the future generations. But as an adult or college kid watching Clone Wars, and I was like, it's Star Wars, it's gonna be great, and watched it, and I was like, oh my God, what? I'm like, I'm glad this is not a bigger thing. I think it actually, for me, brought me like a negative opinion on the franchise itself. So for me, D tier for sure for that one. Let's see. We got Rogue One. Um, this is an interesting one. I think I want to go. I want to go like A minus because it's like the best film that Disney has put out. But I'm gonna start it here in B plus. I may move it up depending on how our list shakes up here. I may move it up to the A tier. Rogue One. So my first experience with it was actually really funny. I had worked 21 days in a row, and my wife had bought me tickets as a Christmas present to go see it in my only day off that I had. And I went there to go watch it, and I couldn't have been more ready for it. The opening not crawl happened for the first time, and I immediately fell asleep. And I could not stay awake. She went and got me a Monster Energy drink, and I was holding it in one hand, and she was watching me more than the movie because she kept thinking I was going to tilt it onto my lap because I kept nodding off. And then she then bought me a coffee with the other hand, so I had a hot coffee in one hand and a Monster in the other, and I still was just like kept nodding, kept almost tilting, like just with my hands just leaning over. And then I just chugged both of them and then still fell asleep. So I was just too exhausted. Now, to be fair, it's the first time I've ever fallen asleep in a movie. Um, and if she's watching this, I still deny that I fell asleep. Um, but I fell asleep while watching, and I kept waking up like every 5 minutes. So like I felt like I had seen the movie, and she was like, "You fell asleep," and I was like, "No, I didn't. It's great. I saw everything. Vader was awesome." Like, and then I saw the movie when it came out on digital, and I was like, "When did they add this scene in?" And she's like, "It was in the original," and I was like, "No, they didn't have this one or this one." And I slept through the whole thing. But acknowledging, that there is some good things coming from Disney, this was a great original story that did nothing but add good characters to an established universe while already celebrating the current stuff without rapping all over it, which is what Disney is famous for right now. Um, it was a good film. There's some characters that kind of annoyed me like a little bit. It had some great moments, but ultimately it relied a lot on nostalgia to get through. I love K2SO. I love the Vader moments. It's rewatchable. I enjoy it, and I think it added a quite good little story to it. Um, I think the only reason I'm not putting it into A tier is because there's nothing that was really built off of it except for maybe Andor. Um, we'll see though. Maybe with Andor season 2 coming out relatively soon, it will celebrate it a little bit more and acknowledge more of its connections to the new film. It raises a good point too when we talk to Andor. I'll bring that up. But right now I'm going to leave it in B. It might be an A minus. I could be easily swayed to put it in A minus. Let's go to the front here. Uh, this is a tough one too. Star Wars, New Hope. Just kidding. It's an S tier. Um, so my original story with Star Wars um, came from when I was, I think, in third grade. We'd seen it at my daycare, and came home, and my dad was like, "How was daycare?" And I was like, "It was the best. We watched this movie called Star Wars. I have to show it to you sometime." Like I was just ranting like nonstop about how amazing it was, and then we get home, and my dad's like, "Don't go inside yet." And I was like, "All right." And we walked in the garage, and he opened up a box, and in that box was sealed VHS tapes, and he just pulled out the trilogy Star Wars and he was like, "Was this the movie you watched?" And I looked and I was like, "Yeah, you have it. Oh my God." Like I thought it was like a brand new film and I was like breaking the glass on it. And he was like, "Yeah, and I have the next two." And my mind was like, "There's two more?" But he only let me have the first one to show him and he's like, "We got to pace yourself. Don't hurt yourself here, son. We got to pace yourself." Star Wars obviously established the foundation of the entire franchise. Um, it's hard for me to choose of the original three which ones are my favorite. Um, but I will say that going back and watching the original it's just so much of a celebration. Even though sometimes it has some lowers that are not as high as the other two, it does have some highs that are amazing, like the Death Star trench run and all that stuff. Iconic moment after iconic moment, iconic music after iconic music. Never gets old to rewatch the original one, and it established the entire franchise. It's nothing less than S tier. And I just saw a recent interesting report that adjusted movies for inflation over the years and like what would be the highest movie grossing of all time. Because obviously it's like Avatar or like whatever Avengers past it, whatever. That's just because they've raised the ticket prices, and adjusted for inflation. Um, showed if they sold the same amount of tickets now versus then, what would be the highest grossing movie? And interestingly enough, it was Gone with the Wind. But when you look at that list, Jaws, Jurassic Park, and Star Wars are all like way, way up there. So like you can't discount just because the total number isn't the same as current films. Star Wars was an epic time in our movie industry. So S tier, New Hope, easy. Um, oof. Book of Boba Fett. Oof. We're going from high to pretty low here. I am going to put it above Clone Wars, the movie. Book of Boba Fett was bad. It was bad. It had its moments. It had a few little nuggets, but unfortunately for Boba, um, who you can see back behind me up here, is one of my favorites. I have an autographed helmet with when I met Tamura Morrison on Boba's Empire Strikes Back Battle Damaged Black Series helmet. I love Mandalorians. Mandalorians are sick. They were always my favorite troopers growing up, and I hope they someday make a Mandalorian War movie or TV show. Book of Boba Fett. I also loved bounty hunters growing up because of Boba. I was couldn't have been more excited to see a show that was going to potentially feature Bosk, Dengar, Forlom, Zuckuss, Cad Bane, all these great guys, right? And Boba. Or Singh, that's, in Clone Wars TV show, Dengar. Did I say Dengar? I probably did. IG-88. All these great iconic bounty hunters that they could have shown in there. They just went the bold strategy of none of that. Let's do Power Ranger teens that do twirly fights. And there was a couple shining moments, which is the only reason it's not an F tier. Um, Unfortunately, the two best episodes were the Mandalorian Bridge Gap episodes where they were explaining what Mando was doing during the time. He literally brought the show back from death at that point by forcing Mando and Grogu down there. And you can't change my mind. I'm almost 1,000% positive that they were not filmed for that show. They were filmed as the beginning of season 3, and then they were moved to Boba to try to save its life. Um, but at the end, adding Cad Bane and a few of the action sequences with Boba was good. Black Chrysanthemum was amazing, but there was too many moments in that show where he was just disrespectful. Like, you remember when he came back in Mandalorian and he needed his armor back? So that was the whole point of the episode. He was fighting like a badass, killing stormtroopers, willing to go toe to toe with Mando over his old armor. And then what does he do in like the second episode of Boba? Third, maybe? He uses it as a freaking satchel, like a man purse, and he just puts his credit in his helmet. And I'm sitting there, I was like, what in the hell? You don't use it as a carrying device. That's like disgraceful to your culture. There was moments like that. There was how many times did we see him in a robe or in a back to tank? Which, by the way, Star Wars is way, way, way overusing back to tanks right now. But I digress. I'll stop ranting on Boba Fett. It actively hurt the franchise. Um, very few moments. Cad Bane was pretty sick, but it's enough to keep it in D tier for sure. It barely made it out of F. Um, it is ahead of Clone Wars though. It did hurt the franchise by existing. People don't remember it right, or remember it in a good way. Fennec Shan too um, was a promising character that they decided to kind of make as Boba's enforcer, as if Boba Fett needs an enforcer. Like he is an absolute badass. And one of the things that drives me insane about the whole Disney take on Boba Fett is I've read the EU. Um, and I call it EU, not Legends, because that's what it is to me. Um, Boba in the EU, originally, or in Legends if you prefer, uh, originally went to go lead the Mandalorians. He took them out of the fight and was like, "Hey, I'm not in this fight against the Yuzin Vong. Um, whatever happens, you guys deserve." But then the Yuzin Vong attacked them because the Yuzin Vong hate technology and drew the Mandalorians into the war. Boba led them and basically helped save the central core of the galaxy by out of nowhere showing up with these badass warriors to help um, the current galaxy versus the Yuzin Vong. They got pushed them out, and then they established him as the new Mandalore. So he goes from kind of bounty hunting, almost like the current Mandalorian story, which is interesting if you see how Disney's trying to replace it. But he went from bounty hunting or hating himself as a clone, vengeful bounty hunter, to near death. Dengar saves him, refining himself as a warrior, leading warriors to save the world and becoming their new leader. It's a great overall story arch that was not explored at all, and it was very disappointing to see him becoming the new Jabba the Hutt. That's above him. That's above where he's at. Let's see. Let's go middle here. We have Another Disney favorite here. Is this Rise of Skywalker or is this Force Awakens? Let me double check here. Can't really tell. That looks like Force Awakens. It's kind of hard to tell. I think this is Rise of Skywalker. So I'm going to treat this one as Rise of Skywalker. I think this other picture here is Force Awakens. So Rise of Skywalker is our first F tier. Um, Thinking back, I cannot think of a single at all redeeming quality of this film. It was rushed, and I've heard a lot of celebrities say that have reviewed it. Like I think it was Josh Gad recently saying that he thinks there's a lot of good ideas in these films, but they were rushed, and that's why they came out bad. And I mean, I would argue that the ideas themselves were flawed, but this was the last film of the new Disney series. It was rushed. It was, whew, I think there's a video out there that shows 42 just functional mistakes that they made during the film. Where none of the things seem to add up right. Um, it was the cap of a story that wasn't good in the first place. There was just so many little mistakes, like the map to find um, the Death Star was so ridiculous. The Exegol, the Emperor, somehow came back. I mean, I can't. They fly now. All this horrible Star Wars stuff is all from Rise of Skywalker, including the final moment when she just claims to be a Skywalker out of nowhere when she's not. She's a Palpatine, and it would have been much better for her character to just say, "I am a Palpatine, but I've grown above it." But no, won't acknowledge it at all. She's just taken on the mantle that she doesn't deserve or earn in any way, shape, or form. And no one seems to have an issue with it. So it actively hurt the film. My wife even when we saw it in theaters started yelling at me for reacting too much during the film. Just like I was just throwing up my hands in the air, like, oh, I guess we're allowed to do this now. Okay, I guess this happens now. There was way too many like grandiose scenes where they just filled like copied and pasted and filled the entire screen with Star Destroyers or Rebel ships, and I was like, there's not that many ships. There's just so many bad moments. The one where I just like officially broke was in the last fight scenes when the Emperor shocked the entire sky and somehow hit every ship not his own. And then, which I was like, okay, so apparently he's that powerful to where he can force lightning and shut off whatever ships he wants. And then when Lando showed up to save the day with all of his big rebel fleet, because they sent out a message and everybody suddenly knew how to get to Exegol, and would come out and help. Their fleet was bigger than the Exegol fleet, and I'm like, well, where have these guys been when you've lost to the First Order? How did they get there? Like, how did they just scramble and all of a sudden we're ready to go in like 20 minutes? I was like, what in the hell happened here? It was just a disaster, and it was all due to the lack of foresight by Kathleen Kennedy. Um, she hired people, fired, got new directors, new scripts, fired, got a lousy director, approved a first script. We've all seen the leaked scripts that have come out for the sequel trilogy that were better than the stuff they put out. They panicked. They put J.J. Abrams in charge. They gave him no time. There was no reason to rush this out. They just wanted to hit a deadline that they artificially made. They could have just chilled out and try to wrap things up better, and they gave no attempt to do so. So F tier actively hurt the franchise by existing. No one wants to acknowledge that the sequels really exist, and they would rather have them retconned than have them be around. Again, for those of you who don't like these opinions, they are my opinions, and you can go F yourself. Just kidding. Um, you guys can like whatever you want. It's no big deal. If you like the sequels, you like the sequels. I'm not going to rain on your parade and tell you you shouldn't like them. There's kids that are growing up right now that Kylo Ren is the badass of badasses. I'm not going to try to take that away from them. To me, growing up with and I guess I should have led with this. I grew up with the original Star Wars as a kid, and in college years, and like late high school, the prequels started coming out. So that's how I grew up into the franchise. Um, so I kind of started at the perfect time to where the newer ones hadn't come out yet. So I got an appreciation for the old ones first, and then built my way up from the ground up. But if you started with the new ones and that's what you like, that's what you like, you know. Let's see here. We got um, Tales of the Jedi. This one again, I don't feel like it added a whole bunch. Let me check something real quick, just so I don't misplace it. I get this one confused with the Tales of the Empire, so I just want to make sure I know the episode list. Oh yeah, so this is the one that had Ahsoka and Dooku and Qui-Gon. So this one I felt was just fine. It added a little bit to Morgan. Oh no, that was the Empire one. It added a little bit to Dooku and Qui-Gon. It showed a fight scene with Yaddle and Dooku to kind of fill in a little gap of what happened to Miss Yaddle. Nothing wrong with it. It was decent to watch. It felt like good little short clips of Star Wars Clone Wars. It probably added a little bit, and then it had one cool fight scene with Ahsoka and an Inquisitor where she just toyed with him. Um, but then there was a couple of episodes in there, like when she was a very young baby, that I just felt were like a huge waste of time. In fact, I originally watched it, turned it off because that was the first episode they had in, and my friend had to tell me, "Oh no, 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 stick with it. They have Dooku and Qui-Gon," and I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll watch them." So I think they're fine. Again, just a different style of doing some short stuff, and I don't think they hurt in any way, and they just add some depth to some already beloved characters. Don't know why my chat's not showing up. If you guys are here and talking, my chat is kind of messed up, so I apologize. But I will just continue with my list. At the end of all this, too, I'm going to highlight it off of Twitch and just post it on YouTube for just to see who's interested in hearing my opinions. I'm just going to start putting some stuff out there and see how it goes. Let's see. Let's go with let's follow it up right with its sister, the Tales of the Empire. Now this one, I'm going to put up in B tier because I think it had just a little bit more edge to it. It had a little bit of Morgan Elspeth in it and Barriss Offee, and it had some Inquisitor training depth, like what did they do to people when they caught them, and it kind of introduced their fortress. I enjoyed that just a little bit more than I did the Tales of the Jedi. Oh, and I should put the Jedi is above Visions. I enjoyed the Jedi and Tales of the Empire much more than I enjoyed Visions. But I would put this as like a B minus, and this is like a C plus so far. Morgan Elspeth was a cool one, and I didn't like the last episode of it where Bears confronted her previous friend, but it was okay. It was entertaining. Let's see. Let's grab one of these guys. Let's go episode 1. Let's grab a prequel. Ooh, I have to think. I'm gonna put episode 1 nestled into the B tier above Empire Strikes Back. Now, this may be the one that I've watched the most in my entire life because my friends and I used to watch this nonstop 24/7. Obviously for the cool parts and also for the bad parts. Love what the prequels added to the story. I will not deny that when they came out, everyone just compared them to the originals and were like, what happened, George? Like Jar Jar Binks, these Nemodians, like what the hell? I've seen different cuts of it. Like Call showed me a anti-cheese cut that was amazing. And it basically edited out all the cheesy stuff that was happening there. Um, and the film's much shorter and cringy stuff, all taken out. But it was much shorter, but it's so much more palatable when you just watch the cool parts. But very, very good film. Actively added to the depth of the franchise, sent it off in a great direction. I would have preferred little changes like Darth Maul living and being where Dooku was for the rest of the film and just having it end on a darker tone. But, it's the first Star Wars back. It had to have the heroes win, yada, yada, yada. Um, so many great performances. Qui-Gon, epic. Ewan McGregor's first portrayal of Obi-Wan. Natalie Portman, Hottie McHottie. Um, that was also right when I was going into high school, so I was like, "Who is that?" She was like my Princess Leia, growing up. Um, we had cringy parts like the Gungans and stuff. The Trade Federation wasn't so bad having droids as the bad guys, but they were at least serious at that point. The droids weren't cracking jokes all the time. I think it was very solid. I think it added to the franchise. It was not the best, and I will be the first one to admit when I go back, like originally, episode one was not that high on my list, but now that I've seen all where Disney brought it's being propelled upwards because back then it was like, oh my God, what happened with Phantom Menace? But now it's like, when you look back, you're like, that's actually one of the ones you want to put on and enjoy to kick you into the franchise. So a lot of great stuff. They spent a lot of the dialogue was a little shoddy here and there. Great music, of course. Great fight scenes. The best lightsaber fight. It's I don't want any questions about that. Duel of the Fates, best lightsaber fight. Choreographed and music. Chef's kiss. Hasn't been matched yet. So high B. I'm gonna put it a little bit below Rogue One. I think if I had to, I do like the prequels, but Rogue One I think is a little bit more solid of a standalone film. Importance of the franchise is probably you could probably swap those, but they're very close. I'd say high B for both of them. Um, Controversial one, Solo. Um, my wife loves this film. I do not. I think it's a D tier. It is better and more rewatchable than Book of Boba Fett. It got a bad rap. It did hurt the franchise by existing. Um, it's one of the only Star Wars films to ever come out and lose money. There's only two. Um, it was a direct reaction to The Last Jedi more than anything. It did have a couple good moments. I liked Lando. I didn't have a problem with Han. Um, Kira was, like an S tier character that they just threw in there. Having Maul come in at the end, sweeten the pot. I don't know why they felt again like they needed to ignore all these already established characters like Bosk and Aura Singh was just written um, off cam too. They just had this Woody Harrelson character just casually say, "Oh, by the way, I killed Aura Singh." Why not show that? I don't get why that wasn't portrayed in the film, or just have Aura Singh in the film in his place. I don't know what the need for all that was, just to establish a new character that was a Disney only character. And then Enfys Nest was the most cringy fucking thing I've ever seen. To have a 12-year-old girl, I'm guessing 12 to 14-year-old girl, be going toe to toe in physical combat with a bunch of people was the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. Um, she's not a Jedi or anything either. She's just an annoying little teenage girl, and then have to everybody fearing her and like following her lead was just like, why? Why are you doing this? Um, there was just a couple cringe moments, and it's really hard to rewatch. My wife likes it because it's kind of like a heist film. The other really cringy character was the stupid ass droid that was leading droid freedom marches. It just, the film was very highly impacted by DEI stuff, um, political messaging. You have it. It was very strong at that time that this came out. It's, in my opinion, it just has no place in entertainment. And I think it actively, like when you rewatch it, some of the characters are dragged down for it. You could argue to me, and I would might give it to you as a C minus, but it definitely felt like it hurt more than it helped. So with my ranking system, I have it in the high end of D tier. It's like a highly polished turd, you know? Let's see. Let's try to help Disney out here. We'll pick something that is a positive for Disney. Let's go with Andor. Andor to me was very, very good. I'm gonna put it in the high end of B underneath episode one, um, and below Rogue One too. Above Tales of the Empire though. So Andor to me was just solid. Apparently, someone's setting off a scream. I can't see chat at all, by the way. My the thing is messed up. That was a little Dean scream. Thank you for whoever set that off. I'm tier ranking my stuff, and we're doing Andor right now. So that's going in my YouTube video. That nice scream. Thank you. Um, we have little sound alerts in this channel, which are amazing. They need to be cheaper so we can use them more. Um, Andor to me was just really good. Um, there was nothing wrong with the acting of it, but it never quite felt like Star Wars to me, except for one episode where they do a heist and it ends in kind of a dark manner with Andor kind of leaning towards his little assassin roots that he's building. It was gritty, it was dramatic. Andy Serkis, phenomenal. But when I watched it, I felt like I was watching a political drama or like something like that. It was more of like a feeling and a build to a gritty universe, a different side of Star Wars, but it was very unique. So solid. I would recommend it to anyone, but for people that watch and go, it didn't feel like Star Wars. Totally agree with you. I feel I'm right there with you. That's why it's not pushed up. Some people have it in S tier. Some people have it all the way down to D, like they don't understand why it's good because Star Wars is, subjective to everybody. Um, but Andor to me, I'm looking forward to season two. It should have more Star Warsy stuff like K2SO in it. That was my main complaint was K2SO was one of my favorite characters, played by Alan Tudyk. And he was hardly referenced, and he's a big part of casting his backstory. Now, the thing I was going to talk about earlier about Andor, when I brought it up before, Andor, we know how the story ends. We know he's going to end up this dark, down assassin by the time Rogue One hits. So all this hope we're building up to him being a hero, we know it's going to come crashing down. So we know where it's going. How long can we pretend that that's not going to happen? Is what I'm curious about. But I'm looking forward. The new one comes out in April here. It's the next Star Wars product. I'm very looking forward. When that does come out, what I'll try to do is weekly when I watch it, I will give a review for each episode that I watch. If I'm still doing the tier listing and making videos like this for YouTube. Um, let's go back to the beginning over here. What do we got here? Let's go with a TV show. Let's go with Rebels. Rebels is one of my favorites. Um, I'm gonna put Rebels, and this is gonna piss some people off, above Andor, but below Phantom Menace. Rebels as a group, the Phoenix Squad, I love them. Absolutely love them. Rebels has a lot of kiddie moments during the original season or two. It took a minute. I think like midway through the second season, it really found its footing, and the overarching stories and multiple part episodes became like I can't wait to watch the next one. Um, Thrawn being back by the end of the second season was fire. Maul being back, fire. The Mandalorians being included in subculture stuff, fire. Um, all the Phoenix Squad, Chopper, down to Chopper, amazing. The only thing that I will say about this is I was so fired up to watch Ahsoka because of Rebels, and I felt like the live action versions of these characters actually made some of them worse and some of them way better. Um, I would put up Kanan Jarrus's sacrifice of himself as one of the greater Star Wars moments of all time. Um, Amazing moment. I did not like the very, very end of the show, which, spoiler alert, you can step away now if there's a problem with it. Um, the blue whales um, taking away Thrawn just to another galaxy felt like, why? Why are you like, that's how you're going to explain why Thrawn isn't around? Um, that wasn't needed. It was already established, I believe, in the books. So the Emperor in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, which I still think should have been the sequel films, which it looks like we're going to get a Dave Filoni version of it. So it's going to be interesting how that turns out. In the original books, I believe Thrawn, the only reason he didn't have a bigger take of what's going on is because the Emperor was a spectacular racist. He didn't like aliens at all. And it was part of his evil nature. But he could not deny that Thrawn was the best strategist he'd have. He only had a few Grand Admirals, and Thrawn was one of them, and he was the only non human one. And he was kept on the Outer Rim where he dominated. And that is why, after the Empire fell, Thrawn picked up the pieces and started rebuilding stuff from behind the scenes. Makes way more sense than some whales just magically took him to some magical planets. And then, yeah, that's why he's not around. Um, but Rebels to me, it's going to be controversial. I like it more than Clone Wars. And I think it just, if I had to choose one to put on, I would pick between those two. I'd pick Rebels. That doesn't mean it didn't add as much to the universe as Clone Wars did, but I just prefer that one. So for me, just below Episode One, I enjoyed the crap out of Rebels, and I know a lot of people didn't, but it is what it is. It's my list. Um, let's go with this one. This is I believe Star Wars Resistance. I'm gonna put this in D tier below um the Clone Wars movie. So I haven't watched. I watched one episode of this. I It's for kids. 100%. It's a kids Saturday morning cartoon. I'm sure there's some kids somewhere that love this shit. Um, it was just a way of hyping up the Resistance pilots and little side characters for little kids to watch an action little cartoon show where there was always flying around, sell more toys. I honestly, there was no redeeming characters or anything like that. It was just a typical Saturday morning cartoon. It was made for profit. It didn't do anything to help the franchise. It's barely out of F tier in that just because it's for kids, I don't want to crap on it too much, but it's basically like a D minus. Like it was a really lazy attempt to create a show um, to capitalize on free marketing. Let's see. Is there any other ones that have like very little to say about? I think that's the only one that's just really little. We will go. I'll be controversial again. Let's go Return of the Jedi. So, Return of the Jedi um, was my favorite one growing up. It had all the big battle scenes, all that stuff. Um, really fantastic scenes, and I really feel guilty not putting every single OT film in S tier for as a collective establishing um, as a whole the Star Wars franchise. But Return of the Jedi to me, when I rewatch them now, I give it an A plus 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 plus. But I don't think it's perfect. Um, it does everything the original does, and if you argued to me it was S tier, I would give it to you in a second. I want it to be S tier. But I feel like there's just little things that, like little tiny bits here, like here and there, like the Ewoks and stuff, that were just a little much and they were just rounding out the franchise and they knew they were kings of the world at that point. Um, iconic moments with the Emperor and Vader. Um, amazing film. But if you put it with the originals, I cannot say in good conscience that it's at the same level as New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. I think it's just slightly below that. So bottom of S tier maybe, very top A tier 100% at its lowest. Um, but if I'm watching the original films now, when I was a kid, it was always Return of the Jedi, and now I would probably lean towards the first two first, for sure. But it's probably my most controversial one. I love the original trilogy. It's S tier in my heart as a whole group, but I feel like the only weakness at all comes from Return of the Jedi. And it's just because of the pacing of the film. And I loved the original Jabba the Hutt scenes and stuff, but the first hour of the film is, like they're like, let's put Carrie Fisher in a bikini. You're like, okay, that's what everyone wants. Sure. Um, Bad Batch to me, this is another one that everyone fucking loves. Ooh, Bad Batch to me, C plus. I would rather watch. It's close to Tales of the Empire. It might be like a B minus, but to me, Bad Batch was a struggle to watch. I was down with the clones originally, and the first episode was pretty good. Had a little cameo of Kanan, but then they had just so many moments where, like, in a hand-to-hand fight, for example, Fennec Shan slaps him around and slaps Wrecker around in like a hand-to-hand fight, and I'm like, but Wrecker can like move a tank, like she took like a punch to the face like it was nothing. Stuff like that really ruined the moment for me on that show. There was a lot of hype around Omega, like why is she so special? And they really barely went into it. Um, I stuck with it through the end of the show. I was highly bored after the first season for most of it. Just very slow paced. Uh, the clones working as mercs were just everything about it was just not very good to me. I thought it had redeeming qualities and it had qualities that were not so good. So I'm going to leave it at the high end of C in that I think it added just a little bit more to the franchise and that there are hardcore fans of Bad Batch. I don't understand why though. I like Tech had a good sacrifice. Was it Tech or Echo? I think it was Tech. Moment. Crosshair I thought was cool. Um, the idea of a highly efficient sniper. Um, and then I liked at the end that they didn't try to do too much with them impacting the galaxy. They just kind of had Omega join the rebels. Yeah, it's interesting to see like where she went, but the whole force sensitive child thing too with Omega kind of shits all over Grogu's story, which came out I feel like almost simultaneously. So they should have looked at that and been like, what the hell? Um, why is one of them so sought after that Moff Gideon's willing to like destroy the galaxy um, to get him an experiment on, but they already had the previous one. You know, I don't know. It was it was kind of a weird thing. But to me, Bad Batch, solid C. I'm never gonna watch it again. There might be an episode in there too that I might want to revisit someday, but overall, not gonna watch it again. Let's go with the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. This is rough for me too. I'm gonna do this. I feel like Tales of the Empire deserves to be above Bad Batch in C plus. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Man, this is tough. I want to go with B minus. It's definitely below Andor. I might go C plus, top of C category for now. Uh, Ewan phenomenal. Hayden phenomenal. Their scenes in the show absolutely fucking epic. Every time Vader and Obi-Wan were on the screen, it was like, you know what? Fuck it. B minus. Every time they were on the screen, it was epic. Now, the entire other half of the show, which is based around Riva, was hot garbage and complicated stories and um, everything we revisited about seeing the Obi-Wan show was like why we wanted to see Obi-Wan back on screen again was phenomenal. Everything with Princess Leia running around, being a fucking cartoon show, everything with Riva really, really, really hurt this franchise. Um, like badly. And I don't know what it was about the lightsaber fighting. It actually looked like they were fighting in molasses. Like compared to other like I understand Vader and Obi-Wan is older, they're gonna move a little slower. But like everything involving Riva and all them looked like they were like they did not know how to fight and they were doing a choreographed fight but in slow mo. Like I go back and rewatch some of these fights. You're just like they're telegraphing their swings like so much. It's not anything like what was established prior. So I don't know if that was just a conscious choice to slow things down. Seeing the fortress was cool. The Inquisitors sucked in live action. They were much better in Rebels and in video games and stuff. Seeing them in live action was horrible. The Grand Inquisitor getting stabbed by Riva was like, the fuck is this? And Vader owning Riva, and yet she just survives somehow. Mysteriously, she came back. Why? What is the point of keeping her alive? She's such a huge problem to the overall story in that she knows about Luke. Like, that's a big fucking huge plot hole. But again, being nice to it, the Obi-Wan and Vader scenes are scenes I could watch till the end of time. Hayden and Obi-Wan on screen is like, get your popcorn out, fellas. It's absolute fire. So I'm gonna leave it at B minus. I genuinely think it's worse than Andor as a show overall, so I can't consciously move it over there. But it has some epic, epic, epic moments that I do not regret watching. But it also has some moments like when he couldn't figure out how to get through a stormtrooper gate, where I'm like, you're Obi-Wan fucking Kenobi. Like, get your head out of your ass. Your Star Wars Jesus. Let's see. Let's go back to the prequels. We'll go with episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Uh, this is the worst one of the prequels. However, I don't really understand why. It has some great the beginning I think is probably what it is, but Genosis, all the last half of the film is fantastic. It had the first ever Yoda fight. Um, the arena fight was cool at the end. Django was cool. Some Coruscant stuff was cool. It was a little cringy teen comedy or teen romance in the middle. Um, I'm gonna put this above Andor, but below Rebels, and it's below Phantom Menace as reference. It's in B tier. I think it's fine. I think it's good. I think it added a bunch of good stuff to the franchise. I don't think it hurt the franchise in any way that I can remember. It was just a solid film, bridging the gap towards Anakin's turn in the third one, and had one of the most shit my pants lightsaber fights at the time. I remember going to see it in theaters about 17 times. I would just get dropped off by my parents, and I would watch double feature of it. And I got like a pirated copy off eBay or some shit. I probably just self-incriminated myself for future crimes against Disney. I remember buying like a little laser disc of it. I got that in Spider-Man before they came out. Watched it a million times on my computer. The Yoda Dooku fight, um, when he drops that stick and fights, you're like, holy shit, Yoda's fighting. It was epic, absolutely epic. And going back to the arena, Natalie Portman getting her shirt ripped off, top 10 moments of my childhood. I was in love with that woman, and I was like, I was right. She is a goddess. Um, just great, just good film. I don't think it's on the same level as the original trilogy. Um, I'll tell you this though, when the original three came out, I watched Attack the Clones more than the other two, and it was originally my favorite one. So my original gut reaction would have been to put this higher than the other two. Just continued the legacy of George. It's good and spawned an entire franchise off of it. And that franchise was, we'll do that next. Look at that transition. Clone Wars, the animated series. Um, I'm going to put this right here in B. B tier is getting crowded. It's going to be above Andor, above Obi, but below Attack of the Clones and Rebels. Now, a lot of people, this is their favorite Star Wars franchise. Um, I don't blame them. I grew up with it. However, when I've tried to rewatch it, um, and when I originally tried to watch it, it was very, very, very hard to watch all the episodes. There's so much filler crap in there for little itty bitty kids. It's hard to get through. But the little sagas that they had, starting really around, I want to say the third season was when they really started having a bunch of chain episodes planned out together. Before that, there was a bunch of stuff with Grievous and Night Sisters and stuff, which were really good. There's so many little stories in there that are phenomenally done. Um, Mandalore going up to season seven. Season seven is a perfect example of the series. Siege of Mandalore is S tier. You can watch that and anytime put on those episodes and be like, wow. There's a lot of stuff I would have improved, like the last fight with Ahsoka ended kind of weird. But then the ending of the show was phenomenal with Order 66. But then the beginning of that season with the stupid ass smugglers was stupid as all hell. It's like, why are you bringing me down, bro? You had me at, you had all this. Oh my God, listen to this music. Some Boba Fett. You had me, like Clone Wars had some amazing episodes and added so much depth to the prequels, which is why it sits like highly regarded up in B tier here to me. It's not a show that I can just put on and watch. Like I can do that with Rebels, I cannot do that with Clone Wars. I have to skip a lot of episodes. But the episodes that are good, like as an example, the Mandalore Maul episodes where Palpatine comes in at the end and just hands Oppress and Maul their ass. I was just jaw dropped, like, what the fuck did I just see from Palpatine? Um, so good, and really foundation of a lot of stuff that has been coming after it. So done nothing but good for the franchise for sure. It does. If some people argued A tier, um, I wouldn't disagree. That's just your personal opinion, but that the other episodes weren't as bad for you. For me, rewatching these right here, this is like the order I would go in. Ooh, let's go with a real controversial. uh, the Acolyte. I'm gonna nestle this in right here, right above Rise of Skywalker for F. I've never watched a train wreck for the sake of just chaos, just seeing where chaos happens. The Acolyte, I did though. I watched every episode. I listened to all the reviewers. I watched YouTube videos of people reviewing each episode, looking for the pros and the cons. I will tell you this, if you watch that show and you just turn on and think it's the fourth or fifth episode and you just watch that one, you probably think you just saw one of the coolest episodes of your life. It's it's a lightsaber fight with Kurtosis involving the Stranger, Manny Jacinto, um, going toe to toe with 9 Jedi. You heard me right, 9. Doesn't make any sense, but the visuals of it and the action sequence of it and some of the most badass lightsaber kills I've ever seen happen in that episode. The rest of the entire series is hot garbage. The character motivations make no fucking sense. They flip flop more than anyone's business. Um, None of the reasons that characters do anything are explained at all. The fight scenes got turned into Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon for parts of it, which pose a whole bunch of new problems in that like you can force float and fly and stuff. And I was just like, oh my god, like you guys have taken it way too far. These guys are way stronger. Like Manny Jacinto's character um, has got to be one of the most badass fighters of all time after what he did. Like, and then just at the very end of the franchise, trying to save it desperately. This and the whole root of the story was corruption in the Jedi Order, showing the Jedi are not perfect and they're all corrupt and hiding stuff and all this stuff, which makes no sense to me. But sure, well, let's explore that space because why not? Um, you get to the end of that, and I'm not even going to bring up the other stuff that they just added into the film and brought to the franchise about R2D2 being gay, trying to get representation into Star Wars. Um, and I say this as a fat person, a fat Jedi made no fucking sense to me. There was a Jedi Padawan in there who was just a guy they brought in who just always wanted to play a Jedi, and more power to him. I feel great that he got to live his dream. You're at a Jedi Academy since birth. How are you gonna weigh that much and like make it part of his character or something? Like he's not good at lightsaber fighting, but he's super powerful in the Force, and that's why he's overweight. He's lazy because he's so good at the other stuff. Something like that. Much better than just my Padawan's about 400 pounds for no reason. Um, I was like, what in the hell? That was me nitpicking the shit out of that episode though. But whatever. They were trying to get representation in it. Don't care. They made the Jedi stupid as hell. They made the Jedi really like beta male energy. Um, Fine, okay. They're exploring all that path, and then in the end of it, with all the corruption, they showed that Master Yoda knew about it. Kiadi Mundi knew about it, and they're part of the cover up. And it was like, what the fuck are you? You're actively dragging down these iconic characters that are Jedi fucking masters at their peak. We were like, what the hell? When I saw that, and then just to throw in Plagueis for the sake of showing Plagueis is there, just looped him in, and it was literally the jangle of keys. Look at this shiny object. We're gonna do more of this when we get a second season. So tell Disney to give us more. We're gonna have Yoda and Plagueis. And it was like, I hate you so much right now. The force choke at the end, by the way, I'm gonna try to get off of this show because I can just sit here and rant about how terrible the acolyte was. But the force choke at the end was the worst acted force choke I've ever seen. I've done better just pretending to force choke my friends, like as a kid. It was one of the worst scenes I've ever seen in my life. And what's his face? The actor who played the main Jedi in it from Squid Game. I forget his name. He, I was in awe of his performance. Like he was putting in his heart and soul into that. His character was so badly written, but he put his heart and soul into that performance, and it was not enough to save how poorly written that show was from start to finish. But back to our ranking system, it was another one produced by Disney that actually hurt the franchise by existing. It damaged a lot of the characters irreparably, and the one or two nice moments of the show were inevitably dragged down, and I'm going to blame it all on Basil the Otter thing that they had in there. Fucking Basil, man. He he straight ruined so many scenes and so many common sense things that they had. Basil sucks. Basil's fucking trash, and he dragged the show all the way down to F. I would rather watch Resistance, the TV show, than watch Acolyte again. Like that's same thing with Rise of Skywalker. Like look at this. This TV show was less damaging than these two. Now let's see here. Let's go back to the sequels, and we'll be a little positive this time. We got we got some bangers saved up here. So let's go back to the sequels, and we'll bring up Force Awakens. We'll be a bit more positive. I genuinely think Force Awakens is average. It is better to me than Bad Batch. I'll put it right at the top of C. Um, I feel like these have to go like this. I think it has to go in front of these guys. So I'll go like this. I'll put it at the top of C. To me, when it came out, I was very hyped for it. I was in awe of a few of the scenes. I remember being starstruck by I went to the original panel at Comic-Con. I met all the actors, like, or not met them like personally, but I got to see all of them on stage um, when they first were promoting the show. I couldn't have been more hyped for Force Awakens coming out. They brought in Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill. We all thought Harrison Ford wasn't going to show up because he had just been in a plane crash, but he showed up anyways. And we got escorted out by First Order stormtroopers for a private Star Wars concert. I was so hyped. Sat down, couldn't put my popcorn down. As an expression, I don't really eat that much popcorn, but I couldn't keep my eyes off the screen in that opening sequence when it was dark and gritty, and then Kylo Ren caught a fucking laser and then held it in midair while he was interrogating people. And I was like, holy shit balls, this movie is great. And then the rest of the movie happened. And when I originally left the theater, I was like, this is fine. Um, I was okay with it. And then I started deep diving, and Caul started deep diving, and he showed me his videos that he's made, which, by the way, go check that out if you haven't seen Caul's rant on Force Awakens and comparing it to the originals. J.J. Abrams literally stole the New Hope plot and just shoved it into a new form. I think he thought that was an artistic way of doing this and a tribute to the original film, so I don't want to say that he just stole it in a mean way. Um, all the characters he brought up were just kind of interesting and weird. Killing Han Solo was felt like an unnecessary thing to do. One of the things we all were looking forward to was the reunification of all three characters on screen, and we never got that. However, this film of these sequels established a start to a storyline which was never completed and caused all sorts of issues with the previous next films. But this film by itself is rewatchable. You can watch it and not want to kill yourself when you're watching it. It's a decent um, direction taking. It has not lost all controls and wheels fallen off at this point. Now, personally, I would have rather had Finn be a fallen stormtrooper that becomes a Jedi rather than Rey. And I felt like there was the foundations of Kylo, Rey, and Finn and Poe, which were all very positive directions to take the film. Um, and those characters were not ruined at all yet. I'm trying to think of characters that were a little ruined. Starkiller Base was a real thing. General Hux was very weak, leader of that First Order group, and having the First Order just come out of nowhere really felt weird to me. I know that they were redoing the whole thing, and the fact that they retconned EU was a little rough for me because I knew the entire EU story. And when they were like, "Oh, this is Ben Solo," and my wife looked at me and was like, "Was that how it was in the books?" And I was like, "No, but I I can't even begin to describe how wrong it is that someone's named Ben Solo." But well, I guess we'll just see where it's going. I don't know. I kept waiting to see Mara Jade or like Jason Jaina Solo. Like, God forbid that. But there was a lot of things they did in that film, like make Han go run off and become a smuggler again. That you're just like, why are you doing this to Han? Like, Han had the life. Like, he's supposed to be a loyal husband at this point, and everything that was written in the books was he was a good dad. Like he and Leia lived a great life after they struggled so much. And in this, they're like a divorced couple with an estranged son. Jason Janer gone. You're just like, it was hard for me to swallow personally, but I was okay with like, okay, they're retconning it and they're doing their own thing. But then they were like picking and choosing. Like, I like the idea of Ben being a name for a character, and you're like, but that's Luke's son. Okay, sure, you can have that. And I like Thrawn. Okay, you can have that for the show. But they should be Thrawn should be the bad guy here, leading the Imperial Remnant, not a super strong version of the Empire called the First Order that mysteriously just appeared out of nowhere after 15 years and is somehow stronger than the Empire. Like, where did that come from? Why is this not a shit like this direction not about the New Republic and the development of the New Republic and dealing with the Imperial Remnant that was still loyal? It kind of flips. It makes sense. One side won the war, they took over the core systems, and the other side had to move out to the Outer Rim, and there were still a lot of issues with people loyal to the Empire on the Outer Rim, and establishing a group called the Imperial Remnant um, to combat the New Republic as they were still establishing control. Makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know why it wasn't included in the film. Um, so to me, again, C. It was average. It started off. It brought Star Wars back to the forefront. It wasn't perfect. It definitely had its flaws. We were all still really looking forward to Last Jedi. We were all popcorn in hand, ready to see Luke back on screen at that point. Um, let's save some of the heavy hitters here for the last bit. So we'll skip this one, this one, this one, this one. Let's go with Ahsoka. Um, I enjoyed Ahsoka more than Kenobi, more than Andor. I don't think it's above Clone Wars. So to me, Ahsoka is good. Um, I felt like it added a bunch. I don't think it took away a lot. I will say some of the characters like Ezra went downhill for me rather quickly. Sabine was one of my favorites because she's a Mando in Rebels, and she took kind of a hit. But then Hera went up for me. Um, Chopper, such a badass, moved up for me. Ahsoka moved up for me. Baylan Skull. And that was the thing that was hilarious was when I was watching the trailer originally, I was worried about these random Sith that they were introducing as new characters. I was like, oh no, they're not going to use established characters in Ahsoka when we've got her trying to find Thrawn. I was like, oh no. But then I knew Thrawn was coming eventually, so I was, I knew that the bad guy was going to be awesome. But then Baylan Skull ended up, and what's her name? Shin Hati, is that her name? His apprentice. Absolute fire. Best part of the show. Uh, I was more enthralled by him and her than I was with the Rebels and Ahsoka that I was looking to nostalgia on the most. Baylan was great. I'm so sad that the actor died. Um, my God, what a well written character. Um, carried carried the show in the earlier part. Um, the end of the show had one of my more favorite scenes ever, which was the zombie Imperial Remnant troopers come into life because that's such a good short story in Star Wars and so scary. And it mixes horror into Star Wars, which I love horror. Um, so Ahsoka to me was better, and I can rewatch it than Ahsoka and Kenobi, than Andor and Kenobi. Um, I'm looking forward to the second season. I love Thrawn. Curious to see where they're going. I thought the Great Mothers were a good idea, but I can see the knocks on the show too. And oh my God, the episode where they go through the world between worlds, I lost my shit, dude. That was seeing Anakin and seeing the Clone Wars brought to life in live action. Holy shit, I thought that was good. I don't think the show as a whole, the story, is good enough to bump into the A tier. Or bump them above, Attack of the Clones or anything like that. But to me, they started in the right direction. It's how they finish this next couple seasons where they're actually bringing Thrawn. Um, Especially since we know Dave Filoni's going to have an Heir of the Empire movie. Um, they the only disappointing real thing to me was Thrawn appeared a little dumb or arrogant. I don't want to say dumb. That's not his character. He over underestimated them, which is just something he does not do. He's very cold and calculating. He's very smart, and he was just like, "Well, that happened. Well, couldn't have seen that coming." It's like, "What? Yeah, you're Thrawn. You can." Um, it should have been an overwhelmingly dominant win for him and escape rather than him losing on his way out the door. Like I just didn't see the point of him having to lose at all. He could have easily just suppressed them till he got out and suffocated them with tactics like he always does. You know, if he had done those things and the rebels had been given a little bit more respect on their name, I think this would have been easy A tier include. Ooh, Skeleton Crew. Next one up. Um, so the show was good. Um, I enjoyed every episode. They added So like we're starting here, right? Like we're starting as it's adding, it's just average adding to the franchise, right? It added to the franchise. It didn't hurt anything. It added characters in a little side story that was compelling and intriguing, but it's written for children. Um, and that's really the only downside. It's a kids like 90s kind of kids movie. I really, really enjoyed it. It had good music. I love pirates, as we all know. We all love pirates here. Um, I genuinely think it was better than Kenobi. Um, I enjoyed it more than Andor. I don't think I enjoyed it more than Ahsoka overall for the movement of the show, and it's definitely not higher up than that. Skeleton Crew to me, it has SM-33, which, we love SM-33 here, right? Um, it had some great lightsaber moments. It had some cold, calculating moments from Jod Nawood. Jod Nawood. It's a weird name. He had some great moments, man. There were some great episodes. It was just enjoyable. There was nothing wrong with it, and it didn't hurt anything. It didn't hurt like the development of the future or any current stories. It was just a side story in Star Wars. It was great. I hope they never touch it again. I hope it's its own little thing, and that's it, and we move on. I don't need to know anything else about the franchise. You could have Jod show up in another story down the road, or maybe in Visions or Tales of um, the New Republic or something like that. That'd be great. Not Tales of the Resistance, please, because Jesus, I hate that name. They shouldn't be resisting when they already won the war. So stupid. But Skeleton Crew, highly recommend it. Um, really good, start to finish. Character motivations made sense. The kids were great. They weren't annoying. Um, just good, just good, solid. I had no negative things to say about it. Let's go. Let's end with good positive vibes, right? So, we'll go with the first one, the TV show The Mandalorian. We'll kind of mix good and bad here. The TV show The Mandalorian, to me, really reinvigorated my love for the franchise. I'm going to put it below Return of the Jedi here. Um, if season three had been a little bit more polished, um, and it all depends on the movie too, right? For Mandalorian and Grogu, um, it would have been S tier. I would have put it above Return of the Jedi. And my favorite moment in all of Star Wars, I'm shit you not, my favorite moment in all of Star Wars television and film was the end of season two when Luke came back. I welled up with excitement. I was so happy at how well that was done. I was watching by myself in here at like 11 o'clock at night. My wife had gone to bed, and I was just to the moon. I watched it like 1,000 times. I just rewound it, and I was like, oh my God. And every single time I watch it, it gives me utter chills when he comes back. The other time I get chills when I watch the show is the third episode, I think, in the first season when the Mandos show up to defend him against the bounty hunters. I was that was another time where when I watched the show, all I wanted was a celebration of Mando culture and Mandalorians shown for the badasses they were. And it wasn't quite hitting those notes like Mando was. 100% Mando was. But they were showing little flavors of like they were gonna do it, and that's when I knew that they really were gonna actually have Mandalorian culture stuff in the show, and I couldn't have been more excited for the rest of the season. Um, First season was god tier, second season was god tier, all the way through, up and down. Bo Katan coming back, um, the return of Luke, Grogu. I mean, everything, the Beskar armor, everything was fire about this show. And the third season happened, and I was still riding that freight train when I saw the Mythosaur. I was like, okay, all right, we're back on track. We saw the Mythosaur, and then it just kind of lost steam. Um, I still enjoyed watching the third season. I didn't dislike any of the episodes, but I feel like Moff Gideon really ran his course. We need to get to a point in that show where we're in a Mandalorian civil war or showing the Mandos reestablishing themselves as a culture. Um, and they were kind of doing that, kind of not, with him backing up Bo-Katan and the armorer, like merging those two. But Din Djarin is without a doubt the unquestioned glue that's holding that all together, and it just didn't make sense that he was taking a back seat to everything. Everyone would have followed Din. Um, so it was weird that he just was handing over control when in realistic culture with Mando, they follow the strongest warrior, which is Din, 100%. He established that um, multiple times, and he's earned it. But he's just so latched on to Grogu. Clearly, that's where Disney's making money, so that's where they want the character to go. Had Mandalorian season 3 been S tier, uh, just like the first two seasons, it would be nestled above, to me, Return of the Jedi, which is saying something big. But Mandalorian single handedly, maybe with Rogue One keeping it afloat, to me, saved Disney's Star Wars. For prolonged its death. But it single handedly brought all the fans back, and it proved to me that if you do Star Wars right and you show Star Wars characters respect, which they did not do in the sequels, um, the fans are not toxic. The fans love it. Even when Mandalorian season 3 wasn't as good and people were being like, "Oh, I didn't like the way they went." They did not go for canceling the show like everyone says they do. They did not harass people. They just said, "I prefer this the other way." But to me, Mando is peak Star Wars. Um, I can't wait for more from that side. But Mando, end of season 2, I still can't watch it. Like, it's clearly my favorite moment in all of Star Wars. I can't think of a better one. Like, you can put Duel of the Fates, all this stuff up there. I would still watch the end when Luke came back and finally got what he did not get in this next thing we're going to talk about, which is respect on his name for Luke friggin' Skywalker. Now, speaking of Jake Skywalker, The Last Jedi. Oh boy. Where in F tier do we put this shit? Uh, to me, God, they're both just so bad. There's only one redeeming scene in the entire film, and it's when Luke stares down the AT-AT, but then he's not actually there. He's dying. And there's a fight scene with Rey and Kylo, which they spent a lot of money on, which didn't end up being that cool. Those are the only two parts in this entire film. But I think out of all the films, this might be the worst one in terms of damaging to the franchise. Not only was this so bad that it damaged the franchise, but it actually hurt the one above it here, Solo, so bad that it brought it from C to D um, because of the money it lost. This was the downward descent, right? We had Force Awakens was okay. Everyone was hyped. We were going to the movies to see this one, Last Jedi. And the very first opening scene, you see Luke throw that lightsaber over his shoulder, and it just makes you want to walk out. Canto Bite was vomit inducing. Holdo, constantly belittling Poe, who was a strong character they built in the first one, for no fucking reason. No reason. Um, they were clearly trying to kill off the original characters too, and they had Carrie Fisher dead, and we already knew. Um, sorry, yeah, Carrie Fisher had passed away, and then in the film, Princess Leia was dying in space with Kylo killing her, which also increases Kylo Ren's character arc that he killed his own mom. And then she just Mary Poppins flies back into the ship, fine, and they keep her alive for some unknown reason, just to squeeze a little more out of her. I don't, you know what? She might have died in the filming of the last one, so maybe at that time she was still alive. But you already killed Han. Luke was dying in this film. Like they were just summarily executing the characters at this point. So they kept her alive for no reason, which made Kylo appear weaker. Um, Luke, his whole EU universe, and even the universe they built up later in Mando, comes crashing down to the ground as he's a hermit that's ignoring all of his friends and letting them die fighting a war, which makes no fucking sense on his character development whatsoever. I don't care who you are, what you say. And now let's just go to the development side of it. Luke was then told to F off, basically. Um, they got rid of their writer, hired a new writer, Ryan Johnson. He submitted one script. It was approved instantaneously by Kathleen Kennedy. No rewrites, no nothing. Now, keep in mind, we've had, talks from other films. I don't know why this shut off. That was weird. Can't hear the music anymore. Weird. I'll just continue. We're almost done. So anyway, just to give you, an idea, budget film of this size, you're probably looking at like 30 to 40 rewrites of an original script to make sure it's written correctly, right? You don't just invest $400 million off one script and then don't fix anything. And then Ryan Johnson was famous for small budget films and smaller productions. And if you watch the behind the scenes documentary of them making this film, he was crying on set. He was ghost, deer in the headlights because it's such a big production and he never worked on anything that big. And he did it. He made it through a major motion film. More power to him. That's an overwhelming feeling. And he's just a Star Wars fan. He was just doing what he thought it was right. I'm not going to knock him. But what he did was his interpretation of fan fiction of Luke Skywalker with no established parameters, just stuff that he found interesting with no character motivation that has been shown to us over the course of 30 years built into Luke. And he ruined the most famous character in Star Wars, brought him down and broke him, had him milking a goddamn cow. And for that, he shattered. That movie, Last Jedi, was not good. It was another retake on showing a Hoth battle scene at the end. They ruined Finn development by introducing Rose, Tico. She just shattered Finn's development altogether. Poe's development was ruined. And Rey, just instead of having her struggle and learn how to do things and learn from the great Jedi Master Luke, just was like, well, I don't need him. I'm going to be better, and left. So it kind of put her on a downward spiral of us disliking her because of her treatment of Luke. And it just put her in a nasty spotlight that she didn't need to be in. And then we had Luke getting absolutely shit on as a character in front of our eyes, where Mark Hamill was crying on set because of He didn't think his character was going this way, and they were like, just film it. Just it's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry. You're doing the right thing. They convinced him as an actor to just shit on his own character. Which, actors don't have that much control over the thing. They want to, but maybe they should have. Nothing redeeming about this film. There was an hour-long gasoline chase. Like we know that there's fuel and all that stuff in the galaxy far, far away. We didn't need to know that that's what we were doing. Just aimlessly running into nothing until they run out of gas. Like, think of a better plot. It's not hard. It's really not hard. And then the broom boy at the end was the cringiest fucking thing I think in the history of Star Wars. I don't know if I hate that more than I do the end of Rise of Skywalker when she's like, Rey Skywalker. Because at least that's Mimi. The broom boy is a piece of shit. Just that anybody who wants to use the Force could use it if they really tapped in. It's so fucking stupid. It's literally built in. It was literally established by George that not anyone could do it, and we all had access to it, but certain people had uh, more in touch to it through things he called midichlorians, and that was his established rules. And Broom Boy apparently is the next genre of, and he's used without training. He's just using it casually to mop up the floor. So fucking dumb. So dumb. Hurt the franchise irrecoverably. These are two terrible films. I think I'd rather watch Rise of Skywalker over Last Jedi because at least then I can not vomit in my mouth. And it'll tell you something that I would rather watch Acolyte over those two. I really would. At least Acolyte had some cool fight scenes and a couple cool characters that I liked. They're all really, really bad. They're all really damaging to the franchise. Um, we'll go with Revenge of the Sith here. Now, I'll be honest. When this came out, I hated it. And it was a personal vendetta. It wasn't the actual film itself. The film itself is the best of the original trilogies, and I think it's A tier. I'm going to put it behind Mando because I would much rather watch uh, Mandalorian as a character and the first couple seasons of Mando than I would Revenge of the Sith. It has one of the greatest fight scenes of all time, Battle of Heroes between Obi-Wan and Anakin. But the high ground scene was rough for me to take. And let me give you some background. The reason why it was rough for me to take was I had read, I just found out that there was books about the original series. So I had read episode 1, episode 2, and I had gotten my hands on episode 3 before the movie came out. And I had read it and it was phenomenal. The book was great. I could not wait to see Grievous. I could not wait to see Dooku, the fight at the beginning, the fight at the end, the way they described the Palpatine Yoda fight, fire. All right. And then when the actual movie came out, I just noticed there were so many things that were different from the book. And the book's explanation of things was much clearer and more succinct, and it was less kiddie. And then when we went to go see opening night at midnight with my friends, they all looked at me and were laughing because of how upset I was. Um, when things like R2D2 uses flames to shoot the battle droids on fire and fly around the screen at the beginning of the film, and then the battle droids had that stupid fucking voice, that like meh 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 voice that they have. I was like, why can't you just have them have a normal voice? Like, why has it got to be fucking funny? Like, the opening sequence was so cool, and then it has R2D, like the fight scene of uh above Coruscant, so cool. And then Dooku and Obi-Wan's fight described so well in the book. He disables Obi-Wan and buries him under debris, and then in the film they just get lazy and rip half of the scaffolding off and put it on top of him. Like, okay, well, Obi-Wan's crippled. Nope. All right, he's just pinned. Sure, I guess Duke is just being gentle. Didn't make sense. There was also a really key moment of that fight where Dooku basically throws the fight because Sidious has already planned to have Anakin fall. Um, and when he loses and Anakin's ready to kill him, Dooku already knows that he's safe, even though he lost the fight, because the Emperor is just going to take him into custody either way, even if he were to lose the fight. Um, and when he says kill him, Dooku is in horror because he's realizing that he was just the puppet to influence Anakin the whole time. And they showed it from Dooku's perspective in the book, and it was great. It did not come off at all in the film. Just like, kill him now. Okay. What have I done? And it was just like all these things were just terrible. Um, the Grievous character was just way cooler as described in the books versus when he came to live action. The coughing was a bit much, but he still wasn't bad. Grievous was my favorite character in the book, and I thought they could have just done him a little bit better. Especially at that point, I hadn't really seen him in the Clone Wars cartoon or anything like that. I don't even know if the Clone Wars cartoon was a thing at that point. But they had like an animated version of Grievous where he was scary as fuck. He was destroying Jedi's left and right. Um, but I thought they did him a little disjustice in the film. Order 66, phenomenal. Battle of Heroes, phenomenal. Anakin falling and killing all the Federation was phenomenal. And then we get to the last part with Yoda fighting Palpatine. And in the book, when Mace goes to get Palpatine, it is described as a I was on the edge of my seat waiting for this too. Is described as a person who goes through like he moves so fast and so hardcore that he turns into black smoke as he moves, and it was there that they realized through those fights. Now Mace's lightsaber form is designed specifically to counteract strong dark side, which is why he survived as long as he did and actually ended up turning the tide of the fight. But the Emperor threw that fight on purpose, which again wasn't really portrayed in the film, to make Anakin um, fall and make it seem like Mace was attacking a defenseless person. And Mace, having been through this crazy fight, he was just in where he saw his friends butchered before he could even blink. Um, goes to kill him. Again, not portrayed very well in the film. Then they go to the Senate chamber fight between him and Yoda. And Yoda, it's shown from his point of view again. Um, the Emperor is throwing shit at him, throwing those Senate seats. He's moving around lightning quick, faster than Yoda. It was not a draw. It was an overwhelming presence on top of him. And Yoda just basically did the math in his head after he tried for a little bit, realized that he had been in his hubris um, as a Jedi Master and just kind of in complacency um, over the hundreds of thousands of years that they were in control, that they were not ready for a true dark side opponent who had been practicing and ready to go. Um, and he was just overwhelmed and realized that he needed to retreat to preserve the future of the Jedi. And in the film, he just bitches out, jumps in a car and leaves. And like again, it's implied, it's just not shown well. Same thing in the Battle of the Heroes at the very end. The high ground is something that if it just happened without him going, "It's over, I have the high ground," and it just was a Anakin raged at him and leapt at him, and then that was his mistake. I think it would have been portrayed a little bit better. But it was just Obi-Wan basically suffocated him with basic defense. Again, describing lightsaber forms and all that stuff, that it was a perfect counter to Anakin's full-blown rage. Just his annoying defense, just full on caused his rage salt to backfire and him go down. So when I saw this movie live, I fucking hated it. I was like, this was wrong, this wrong, this wrong. Oh my god, this is wrong. Going back in hindsight now, rewatching it, it's not that bad. it's it's still better in the book, but when you look at all the films, Revenge of the Sith, it's clearly better than Episode One and Two. Um, in the hierarchy of all the films, um, It's still one of the most impactful and dark films that you're going to see in the Star Wars universe. Having Order 66 and the Empire winning to end the series, was something that was building up for years, and great to see Lord Vader's fall. It's totally rewatchable. I think it's better than Rogue One, better than Episode 1, 2, Rebels, all those ones in B tier. Um, I can see why some people would have it up in S tier. It's their favorite movie growing up, but honestly, none of the original trilogy films should be touched by any of the new content. It's just a matter of because they're just not as good. I remember seeing the original trilogy and then seeing the prequels, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that the original trilogy was better than the prequels. They added different characters to the universe, and maybe you grew up with the prequels and you like them better than the originals because they're more palatable to you. Understood. Not to me. Not to me. Um, the prequels are on a different tier than the original trilogies, and the sequels are like 4 tiers below that right now. But Mandalorian, I think, is the best Disney product that they've put out and deserves to be mentioned near those names. Now, the last one, clearly S tier, easy one, and I think it's the best Star Wars film of all time, Empire Strikes Back. Um, I don't think it has a flaw. I can't think of a flaw. Hoth, epic. Cloud City, epic. Dagobah opened up a whole new can of worms on the Star Wars universe with Yoda, epic. Luke failing as part of his hero's journey, the Empire crushing the rebellion throughout this film, and then basically barely making it away. Han gets captured. The reveal of uh, Darth as Luke's father is iconic. Um, Everything about this film, Boba Fett's introduction to the Star Wars universe, iconic from start to finish. There's nothing. It's almost a perfect film. Um, the showdown at Cloud City is the first real epic lightsaber confrontation that we were expecting. And I mean, had it been written in today's time with today's CG, it probably would have been insane what Vader was able to do. But back then, like that was the best of the best stuff flying through the air and little lightsaber clashes here and there. It's the circle is now complete when this film comes out. It's S tier. It's the best film in Star Wars history, without a doubt. It's the only sequel in a trilogy other than maybe Aliens that I can confidently say is better than the original. It just added so much depth and set up the next movie even better. And Return of the Jedi, it's the ending of something we didn't want it to end, which is why it's probably just a little lower in that A plus tier. But Star Wars from the original trilogy from start to finish should dominate these charts, and they do on mine.